The coin hits the wooden table with a dull, flat sound. Not the sharp ring you'd expect from silver. Something softer. Dead. A merchant pauses mid-count. His thumb presses into the surface, rubbing the edge like he's trying to wake it up. The metal flakes just slightly under the pressure. He brings it closer to the oil lamp. The flame flickers. Yellow light slides across the coin's face. It looks right. Stamped, official, imperial. But it doesn't feel right. He glances at the soldier standing across from him. Armor dusty, hand resting near the hilt. Waiting, not impatient. Just there. The merchant exhales through his nose, slow, sets the coin down with the others, doesn't argue. Behind him, shelves lined with grain sacks, dried herbs hanging from the beams. The smell of dust, sweat, and warm metal hangs in the air. Outside, carts rattle over stone. Life goes on. But something has shifted. The coins are lighter now. No announcement, no decree shouted in the square, no warning nailed to a door. Just a quiet change in the metal. And somehow, without anyone saying it out loud, everything starts getting more expensive. So here's the question most people never ask. What if the system doesn't take your money all at once? What if it shaves it away, slowly, silently, until one day you realize it's gone? That coin on the table wasn't fake. That's the part most people miss. It came from the state. It carried authority. It was, by every legal definition, valid money. And yet in practice, it bought less than it did just a few years earlier. Not because the merchant changed his mind, not because the goods became rarer overnight, because the metal itself had changed. This is where the story stops being about one shop, one coin, or one empire. It becomes a pattern. Across centuries, across continents, governments have faced the same constraint. They need more resources than they can openly extract. Wars, infrastructure, political promises. These are expensive. Raising taxes directly is visible. It creates resistance. People notice when something is taken from them. So the method evolves. Instead of taking more, the system quietly changes what money is. In the Roman Empire, silver content in coins dropped from nearly pure to almost nothing over time. Prices didn't rise all at once. They crept, then accelerated. Soldiers demanded higher pay. Merchants adjusted. Savings lost weight without ever leaving the owner's hands. Fast forward. The mechanism changes form, not function. Paper replaces metal, then digits replace paper. Central banks expand supply. Governments run deficits. New money enters the system, not evenly, not neutrally, but through specific channels. Banks, asset markets, state spending. By the time it reaches ordinary households, prices have already moved. Vagas lag behind. Purchasing power erodes. No one knocks on your door to collect this tax. There's no bill, no receipt. And that's precisely why it works. Because what you can't clearly see, you rarely resist. The pattern doesn't rely on one method. It never has. It survives because it adapts, changing form, language, and tools, while keeping the same underlying function. Move resources without triggering resistance. You don't see a single system. You see layers. 1. Currency debasement leads to inflation as a silent tax. A mint worker leans over a furnace. Heat pushes against his face. Sweat runs down his neck, disappears into the collar. He lifts a rod, dips it into molten metal. The glow is bright, too bright to stare at. Behind him, a supervisor watches the mix. Less silver, more base metal. No announcement follows. The coin still carries the emperor's face, still spends the same, at first. But the market adjusts faster than the decree. This is the simplest mechanism ever used and the most persistent. Debasement becomes inflation. Inflation becomes policy. In ancient Rome, the silver denarius lost most of its intrinsic value over time. Prices responded, not evenly, not predictably, but relentlessly. By the 3rd century, soldiers demanded more pay just to stand still in real terms. Merchants raised prices before costs fully hit them. Trust thinned. The system didn't collapse overnight. It stretched, then strained. Now replace metal with paper, then paper with digits. Modern inflation works through expansion of money supply, central banks increasing liquidity, governments spending beyond tax revenue, deficits funded through borrowing or indirect monetization. New money enters specific points first. Financial institutions, government contractors, asset markets. By the time it spreads outward, prices have already shifted. This is known quietly as the Cantillon effect. Early recipients gain purchasing power. Late recipients, wage earners, savers, pay for it, not through a bill. Through erosion, your salary number may rise. But if food, housing, and energy rise faster, the difference is taken without confrontation. That's the key. No confrontation. 2. Sovereign debt to interest streams upward. A clerk scratches numbers into a ledger. Ink smears under his wrist. Across the table, a man in tailored clothes slides a document forward. Calm, precise. A bond. The government needs money immediately. War doesn't wait. Infrastructure doesn't pause. Political cycles don't tolerate delay. So it borrows. In 1694, when Britain established the Bank of England, it formalized a system that still defines modern finance. Governments issue bonds, investors buy them, and the state promises repayment with interest, funded by future taxation. On paper, it's efficient. In practice, it builds a pipeline. Money flows from the public to the state through taxes, then from the state to bondholders through interest payments. Who are the bondholders? Historically and still today, primarily institutions, wealthy individuals, pension funds, and financial entities. This creates a structural loop. The broader population funds the state. The state services debt, debt payments concentrate upward. It doesn't require corruption. It functions by design. Modern deficit spending expands this further. Governments roll over debt, issuing new bonds to pay old ones. The total grows. Interest compounds. And when pressure builds, options narrow. Raise taxes, inflate the currency. Cut public services. Rarely does the burden move upward. It disperses downward, quietly, broadly. Again, no single moment where people can point and say, this is when it was taken. 3. Crisis response to privatized gains, socialized losses. A trading floor. Screens flashing red. Voices overlapping. Phones pressed tight against ears. Someone swears under his breath, not loudly, just enough to release pressure. Liquidity dries up faster than expected. Positions unwind. Then the system steps in. In 2008, financial institutions faced collapse after years of high-risk lending and securitization. Mortgage-backed securities, once treated as stable, began to unravel. Losses stacked quickly. Failures should have followed. It didn't. Governments intervene. Bailouts, emergency lending facilities, asset purchases. The stated goal: prevent systemic collapse. And to be clear, it worked. The system stabilized. But look at the sequence. Risk taken in private markets. Gains captured during expansion. Losses transferred during collapse. Taxpayer-funded interventions absorbed the downside. Institutions survived. In many cases, they grew larger afterward. Consolidation under stress. For the public, the effects were indirect but real. Increased public debt austerity measures in subsequent years. Slower wage recovery, asset inflation benefiting those already invested. The mechanism here isn't hidden. It's reframed. Stability. Systemic importance. Too big to fail. Language shifts perception. Outcome remains consistent. 4. Monetary expansion leads to asset inflation and inequality. A central bank conference room. Quiet. Controlled. Screens show curves, projections, volatility bands. A decision is made. Not dramatic. No raised voices. Rates go down. Liquidity goes up. After 2008 and again in later crises, central banks deployed large-scale asset purchases, often referred to as quantitative easing, QE. Trillions in new money entered the financial system, but it didn't enter evenly. It moved through. Bond markets, equity markets, real estate financing. Asset prices responded first. Stocks climbed. Property values increased. Bond yields compressed. If you owned these assets, your balance sheet expanded. If you didn't, the effect looked different. Housing became less affordable. Entry barriers rose. Savings in cash lost relative value. This creates divergence. Not immediately visible, not always acknowledged, but measurable. Wealth concentrates where assets are held. Income alone struggles to keep pace. The system doesn't need to explicitly favor one group. It only needs to distribute money asymmetrically. The rest follows. 5. Complexity leads to obscuring the transfer. A stack of documents lands on a desk. Thick, dense. Pages filled with clauses, cross-references, technical language. A taxpayer flips through it, stops, skims, closes it. Too much. Modern financial systems operate with layers of complexity. Tax codes spanning thousands of pages. Financial instruments with embedded derivatives. Government budgets broken into opaque categories. regulatory frameworks shaped over decades. This complexity isn't accidental. It serves a function. When systems become too dense to track, accountability weakens. Not because people don't care, but because they can't realistically follow the flow. In ancient systems, debasement could be seen. Coins physically changed. Today, the equivalent sits in balance sheets, policy statements, and indirect mechanisms. You don't hold it in your hand. You experience it. In rising costs, in delayed wage growth, in shifting retirement expectations. But the pathway from cause to effect is obscured. And what's obscured is rarely challenged effectively. Each of these mechanisms operates independently. Together, they reinforce each other. Inflation reduces real debt burdens. Debt issuance funds spending without immediate taxation. Crisis interventions preserve system stability while redistributing losses. Monetary expansion inflates assets unevenly. Complexity ensures the process remains difficult to trace. No single lever explains the system. But the pattern once seen becomes hard to ignore. The setting changes. The pattern doesn't. A Roman merchant weighs coins under a dim flame. A medieval trader signs a loan he cannot refuse. A British investor in the 1700s folds a government bond into a leather case. A modern worker refreshes a banking app, watching numbers rise, then noticing prices rising faster. Different centuries, same structure. In the Roman Empire, debasement hollowed out the currency from within. No debate, no public vote, just a gradual shift in metal content that forced the entire economy to adjust. The burden spread across everyone holding coins. Move forward to medieval Europe. Kings didn't dilute coins as often. They leaned on coercion, forced loans, seizures, financial pressure dressed as loyalty. Wealth moved upward through obligation, not markets. Then comes early modern Britain. The system evolves. Less force, more structure. Government debt becomes institutionalized. Bonds replace coercion. Taxes fund interest payments. It looks cleaner, more legitimate. But the direction of flow remains the same. Now look at the present. There is no visible debasement. No soldier at your door demanding a loan. No parchment bond signed under candlelight. Instead, inflation adjusts purchasing power quietly. Debt expands across decades. Central banks inject liquidity through financial channels. Regulations shape who can compete and who cannot. The mechanisms are more complex, more abstract, but also more scalable. And that's the shift. Older systems were blunt, limited by geography and enforcement. Modern systems are systemic, embedded, global. They don't need to compel you directly. They just need you to participate. Because once you're inside the system, earning, saving, spending in its currency, you're already exposed to its rules. And the rules across time have followed a familiar direction. A man stands in a small grocery aisle, turning a package in his hands. Same brand, same size. The price tag beneath it, higher than last month. He puts it back, picks up another, compares, pauses, then walks away without buying either. No announcement told him what changed, but something did. That's where this stops being history and starts becoming useful. Because if these patterns repeat, and they do, then the goal isn't to predict every move. It's to understand exposure. First, stop taking numbers at face value. A rising salary, a growing account balance. These are nominal. What matters is what they buy. Track purchasing power, not just income. If your costs rise faster than your earnings, the gap is the system at work. Second, understand where money flows first. When new money enters an economy, it doesn't spread evenly. It concentrates. Financial markets, institutions, specific sectors. Knowing this doesn't mean chasing trends blindly. It means recognizing why some assets rise while wages stall. Third, reduce single-point dependence. If all your value sits in one form, one currency, one income stream, one system, you absorb all its weaknesses. Diversification isn't about maximizing return. It's about limiting vulnerability. Fourth, keep liquidity. Systems under stress change rules. Access matters, timing matters. Liquidity gives you room to move when conditions shift. And finally, stay aware of structure, not just headlines. Policies come packaged as solutions. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But the mechanism underneath, that's where the real story sits. The coin didn't stop being money. It just stopped holding its weight. That's how it works. Not with a single moment you can point to, not with a line crossed in public, just small adjustments. Metal, paper, digits, until the value shifts and no one can say exactly when it happened. Rome did it with silver. Kingdoms did it with force. Modern systems do it with policy. Different tools, same direction. If you trace the pattern, it always moves quietly, gradually, then all at once in hindsight. So the question isn't whether these mechanisms exist. It's whether you recognize them while they're still unfolding. Because by the time it feels obvious, the adjustment has already been made.